let me introduce myself, tell you a little bit about the work that I do because, like, if you ask my parents, it's hard for my parents to even describe what I do. Like, if you met my parents, they would just say, well, he around, he not locked up, and he's all right, you know. And so I'm gonna try to explain to you guys what I do. But let me also say that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Erin, because I was so sick this morning I couldn't get out of the bed. But I have so much faith in what she is doing. And I live in D.C., so I'm not, you know, I got in the car with a box of tissues and a couple jugs of tea and drove down here to make this commitment because, ladies and gentlemen, this is a discussion that we got to have. And also understand that there's no way that we're going to be able to problem solve at the level that we need to problem solve in 2 hours. Oftentimes, we look at this kind of microwavable notion that we could just come together for 2 hours, write some stuff on a flip chart, and we're going to be good. The issues that black men and boys face are historical and are woven into the fabric of America. And so unless we're willing to deal with the issues that black men and black boys are faced with from a historical standpoint, we're wasting our time. Now, I don't know if Erin lets you know, I'm real open and honest, right? And so one of the things that I want to do is kind of create this environment where everybody feels emotionally safe, even if somebody says something that you think is absolutely outlandish. They're entitled to their opinion. We live in a country, right, where we got something called free speech, right? And so I want people to feel comfortable enough to ask that provocative question that you were thinking about when you were sitting in your home watching CNN and you see all of this stuff going on in Ferguson. Because if we can't, those of us that work with children and families, if we can't be bold enough to have these kind of conversations, we're in more trouble than I thought we were in. Okay, so I want people to feel comfortable, right? If I say something that you just clearly don't understand, just raise your hand like you lost me there, right? But I really want, this only moves based on the energy and the input in this room. I could do this same workshop 10 times and the conversation would be different. And so it's really entirely up to, stand up if you're sober. Stand up if you're sober. That's not a trick question. All right, y'all can sit down. Stand up if you're responsible. Relatively, sometimes you don't pay your bills. That's everybody. All right, you can sit down. Stand up if you believe in a spiritual power, something greater than yourself. Okay, you can have a seat. And so, born and raised in Baltimore. And there were, just for the sake of time, because I also think, what's funny? Oh, he was on autopilot. Okay. Just for the sake of time, I tell stories. When I work with children and parents, I tell stories because I think that the art of storytelling is very powerful, particularly with children. Children need to understand that as adults, we've made mistakes, we've fallen short, but there was something about who we are in our DNA that made us persevere. So storytelling is real important. So I'm just going to tell you 2 really, really quick stories that got me to where I am now. When I was 12, 2 of my best friends blew their brains out in front of me. I was a student at Pimlico, which used to be up on Northern Parkway and Park Heights Avenue. And so the summer that I was 12, 2 of my best friends blew their brains out playing a game called Russian Roulette. How many of y'all know what Russian Roulette is? If you don't know, raise your hand, because I want to make sure we all on the same page. And my voice is cracking, so bear with me. Russian Roulette is you take a gun, a revolver, you put 1 bullet in the chamber, you spin the chamber, you put the gun to your head, and you fire. We believed growing up in the neighborhood that this was a test to define whether or not you were a man. So 2 of my best friends, me there, my brother there, 1 or 2 other guys blew their brains out. That was the earliest form of trauma that I can remember. For those of you that are working with children, the Sun paper has been doing some amazing stories on children and trauma. I strongly suggest you look at these stories because as you're working with these young people, some of y'all are teachers, Some of you are working with kids in an after-school component. Some of you are mentors and tutors. As you begin to understand this whole notion of trauma, some of these things are going to begin to make sense in terms of the behaviors that you see with children when you walk into a building. When I was 19 years old, I was at Morgan State University. My best friend was at Morehouse. So I grew up, how many of y'all are from Baltimore? By show of hands. So y'all pretty young. All of y'all pretty young. Pretty young group, under 30. She like, nah, not over here. Okay. So I graduated from high school in 1986. So I entered this journey into manhood during the height of the crack cocaine epidemic. Baltimore was doing 400 murders. I know people jump up and down now because we only at 211. That's a major accomplishment. I mean, everybody should be jumping up and down to celebrate. We went from 400 to 211, right? The Baltimore-D.C. corridor was the most dangerous corridor in the country. Washington, D.C., which used to be Chocolate City, it's not Chocolate City anymore. That's a whole nother workshop, right? D.C. used to do 485. How many of y'all have driven through D.C.? D.C. is not that big to be doing 480 some odd murders. So I grew up during a pivotal time in American history. And the deal was, we used to sit on my mother's porch, and the deal was if you get a chance to leave, leave, don't ever come back. Well, my man decided to come back in August of 1989. He decided to come back. We were standing on the corner of below North and Maryland Avenue. 3 guys tried to rob us. Because we didn't have the money, they started shooting. My best friend was shot in the back. He died in my arms. I wasn't a Crip. I wasn't a Blood. I wasn't a gangster disciple. I wasn't a gang member. I was a college student. And I share that with people because sometimes, y'all, you really don't know where these young folks are mentally and where their families are. And we make a whole lot of judgments. Well, they trifling. They drug addicted. Almost everybody I know has used hardcore drugs, right? All of my friends growing up. One of my good friends is a full tenure professor at Emory in Atlanta. And so I usually tell people I got 2 sets of friends. Most of my friends either have an undergraduate degree, master's degree, PhD, or medical degree. But then I got a whole lot of my friends who are at Baltimore City Jail, Hagerstown, in the federal system. And so I'm sharing that with you because part of the problem is we never talk about black boys like me, right? We never talk about young black males who are doing extremely well. We always look at black boys from a deficit model. What's wrong with black boys? I would submit nothing is wrong with us. Something is wrong with the society that we live in. And I want y'all to, and that might be something that you got to sort of dance around in your head. Nothing is wrong with young black males in America. The vast majority of these young men, how many of y'all have seen Boys from Baraka? How many of y'all seen Boys from Baraka? Write it down. Because we're going to give y'all a whole lot of reasons. Write it down. Physically, take your pen and write it down. Or if you got an iPad or something like that. It's called Boys from Baraka. So Boys from Baraka, very quickly, is a story about some boys in East and West Baltimore who were really struggling academically and socially. The system knew that they probably weren't going to graduate, so they took them to Kenya, East Africa. The Able Foundation decided to fund this initiative. They took them to Kenya. When they bombed the embassy, all of the U.S. personnel had to leave, so literally they brought the boys back and they dumped them off at their mama's house in Baltimore. Another failed social experiment on working with young black males. One of those young men, myself and Selwyn over here, raise your hand, Selwyn, had a chance to meet with a lot of those boys 2 or 3 years after they got home. One of the young men just called me. He just came home from doing 5 years federal prison. Why am I sharing this with you? Because we got to change the way that we look at the world, y'all, and we got to change the way that we do work. And so, again, you know, there's some slides and stuff, but, you know, what I really want to get to is when we break you up into smaller groups, I want the conversation to be rich. I want the conversation to be honest. And if it's too heavy, leave. Because the work that we do now is for the future generations of children. It's just that simple. I'm not out here working because I got the flu, because I like working and I can barely stand up. I'm doing this because we got to plant a seed in the men and women who are doing this work, all right? And so we're all, I use the term co-laborers, right? Some of us may have different experiences. Some of us may have different skill sets. but we all in this together. And so I'm not going to lecture to you. I'm not going to try to force you to believe what I have to say, but I do want you to think about it critically. One of the other things that we're going to do, and I purposely decided not to print it out and bring it, is if you sign one of the sign-up sheets or put a star next to your email address, I'll send you a list of tremendous resources. 3 or 4 days ago, I emailed some of my colleagues, and they sent me about 350 different resources, from videos to books to talking points that you can begin to use, to scholarly publications, to even some other videos, whatever the case may be. I'm not going to just be making a whole bunch of copies and giving it to people and you just throw them away, whatever the case may be. And so, and Aaron, y'all can kind of figure out how you want to do that. We'll shoot you a list. Any questions before we get started? Anybody afraid? Raise your hand if you're afraid. 2 people? Okay. 1 person? Okay. So here's what I want you to do. Let's count off, and we're gonna rearrange our seats. I need you to help me out with this because I ain't real good at this counting thing. So we're gonna break them up into groups of 4.
Okay.
And so whatever, like ones, however you want to do it.
Okay. Jackie, you're 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you want 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
You all right?
Can you bring one?
You all right, man? We just got started, man.
You're 4.
Okay.
Franco. One.
Can each person get pencils? Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Ruth. 1. Yep. You 2. Are you 3? 3. All right. And then did we miss some people in the back? It's very complicated. Okay. You're 4.
This is not alcohol. I know some of y'all are like, man, you getting ready to take a drink at the training? That is not alcohol.
All right, we got it.
So if we can have, where are my ones? Raise your hand if you are 1. Okay, so let's do 3 groups of 1 across the front, and then the same thing with the 2s, 3s, and 4s, because I really wanted to mix the room up.
All right. So you want? Can we just?
Or was I just being too difficult?
Yeah, you were.
Because that's how my brain works.
How about 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s?
Okay.
Okay. So 1's over here. 2's here. 3's over there, and 4's in the back.
Let's move quickly. Everybody should have an index card and something to write with. If you don't have an index card, something to write with, raise your hand. If you don't have an index card, raise your hand. It's coming. If you don't have an index card, we good? Everybody got index card? In the back, you got them? The pencils are not. We'll share. Who doesn't have anything to write with? Like which group? 1 person? Okay. He should have came with 1 though.
Does everybody have a pen?
That's 20 push-ups next time, man. Okay. So introduce yourself to, and we're going to do this in 4s. So I'd like you to kind of arrange yourself in 4s or 5s. It really doesn't matter. Arrange yourself in 4s and 5s. So some of you may need to turn around, however you want to do it. Huh? No. If there are 4 people, 4 or 5 people, it doesn't really make a difference. 4 or 5 people. So quickly introduce yourself to the people in your group. If you can hear my voice clap once, if you can hear my voice clap twice, let me know if somebody in your group is antisocial. We'll deal with that. Anybody dealing with any issues with somebody being, who? Him? Without the writing utensil? Okay. All right. So here we go. One of the things, y'all, that we're going to kind of ease into, I'm going to show y'all a video clip. But I want to tread lightly because I know that this is an issue that really affects all of us. What I want you to do as an individual is I just want you to jot down, as an individual, what are some of the lessons you learned from what happened in Ferguson? And we don't need to go through all of the different scenarios. I think people are pretty familiar with the multiple scenarios. As an individual, don't write your name on this. You're not going to be penalized. Your supervisor ain't going to jump on you after the training because you were real honest. Just write down 3 lessons that you learned from what happened in Ferguson. I'll give you a couple minutes. Thank you. So just take a moment in a safe environment to just, jot down. What does she need? See, that's what happens when you come in late. I'm going to put you on the spot. Can somebody lend her a pencil? Don't worry if you can't come up with 5. Some of us are overachievers. We've probably written down 10. So 3 to 5 is sufficient. And so now here's what I want y'all to do. Within your group, first thing that I want you to do is I want you as an individual to share what your lessons learned are in your mini group. Then what I want you to do is figure out if there's a way that you can consolidate all of the responses that have come up in the group. So for example, you got 4 people here. There's probably some overlap in some of the lessons learned. See if you can consolidate your 4 different lists, your opinions, your ideas, your reflections, and see if you can just come up with one list. Okay? Anybody unclear? Okay, I'm going to give you about 10 minutes. Some of you may need to turn around. Your group members may be behind you, beside you.
So I think just the widespread nature of it.
Well, when I first started writing, I said that there wasn't any lesson that I actually got out of it because a lot of the things that happen in Ferguson are just realities that African American men face every day. But a lesson that I can kind of say is that once the verdict came out, it was just evident that police will protect other people's law enforcement and lives about the situation. And that even the abuse of power wasn't necessarily addressed.
So, I guess just broadly,
The
engaging in police dialogue and how that it's not really been helpful to have very different sessions about this because the people that have such different views don't actually want to engage in this conversation. At least as far as I have experienced it with older people that are different.
I feel that. I learned Christmas dinner. But,
Join the group.
thanks, I learned. So, I won't, this is not, I won't learn more about police forces. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a teacher, but.
I thought about a spot I was there. I don't know what kind of
3 to 5 lessons learned.
in my opinion, but I wasn't there, so I think the lesson learned that was particular. Like, oh, that.
Help to protect black people, protect white people, black people,
I didn't really realize
I
that there was
want to know.
Okay. If you can hear my voice clap once, if you can hear my voice clap twice. Which group would like to share? And I really want, we'll come to you. I really want folks in the room to really listen to the things your colleagues are going to share. And if you do have a question, comment, or reaction, raise your hand, we'll get you, all right? Because we want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. Your voice can't be heard if you don't have anything to say, okay? And so who was first? I think this group in the back.
Yeah. So we said that the main things that came out from our group were racism still is very prevalent in our society, the fear for black males in our society, fear and frustration about injustice. We learned about that through this incident. The fact that there's a lot of fruitless conversations being had because both sides aren't really listening to one another. We talked about how there's a lot of uncaring individuals who are maybe kind of blind or ignorant to things that are going on around them. And we also all talked about the need for change.
Thank you, thank you. Questions, comments, reflections? You guys want to go next? You guys speak up just a little bit.
Okay. It says that one's definition of justice is not the universal definition. We will never see a day when everyone will be on one accord because of cultural vocabulary and the hardship of a young black male.
Go back to the second one.
We will never see a day when everyone will be on one accord because of cultural vocabulary.
Questions, comments, observations? Thank you for being bold. Yes, ma'am.
I have to be the eternal optimist and disagree with that statement. I think right now we definitely suffer from that barrier, and I think that will always be a barrier, but I do also think that it's something that can enrich and not prohibit the relationships that we form, especially starting with conversations like this.
Anybody else? Yes, sir. And then the young man in the back.
I think
nice and I know you talk about.
If we don't address the legal system in this society, then things aren't going to change. There'll be posturing, there'll be a lot of demonstrations, but it all boils down to the legal system and the way things are worded, because it's second-class citizenship. How can you have somebody that's murdered in cold blood and you can have it on, like with Eric Gardner, even though this is something it's related? You can have state-sponsored agents that can basically put themselves above the laws that they hold the people to. That's a double standard. That's basically saying that your lives mean less than ours because we can kill you, murder you in cold blood, and let these things happen and nothing is done about it. And that is directly correlated to the actual legal system and claiming the term black people being. But that's a whole nother conversation. But being a black person in America is basically saying, like, you don't exist.
Go to the young man in the back, and then we're going to move on. Yes, sir.
Oh, I was interested if there was any police officers here tonight.
Great question. Any police officers who would like to stand up? Any law enforcement? Anybody want to be a police officer in your second sort of career after this? Okay, great question. Great question. Who's next? This group here.
Good evening, everyone. I think the consensus as a group was that we learned nothing from the situation. This is not anything new, anything that we have not seen before, but we all did agree that it did evoke the feeling of frustration.
Observations, comments, reflections. Yes.
It kind of struck out that group who said we learned nothing, because I'm kind of thinking that it's on a continuum, but now it's different with classes. So I kind of side with that group. Is we may have taken some things away from it, but we don't believe that anything's going to change as a result. So I'm kind of hearing is that.
Oh, is that no? We don't feel that way. We don't think that there won't be change. We don't think that there won't be movements. We don't think that there won't be solutions put in place. But what was learned from this situation was nothing.
We're talking about the criminal justice system. While there may be this system, we're understanding that injustice, as it relates to all of our systems, creates situations like this. We didn't learn anything different. I mean, I'm speaking solely for myself now. That if I look at a history book or I look at any decade in this country's history, there are a million Michael Browns, a million Eric Garners, and we have. I mean, it is not just a black male. It's someone who is also poor, someone who is also different from whatever society views as the norm. So for me, I learned nothing. I've seen this numerous times, but it doesn't mean that I don't think things will change. But I didn't learn anything, no.
Okay, let's go to this young man over here and then here.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I agree with the statement, because what she put out was that we learned nothing from it because, like she said, history repeats itself. And that's what I was just going to go with. The history repeats itself, and this was just a repeat of some of the same history that we've seen. And because of that, it wasn't so much that we learned or took anything from it this time, but it was simply a reminder. It was a reminder, oh yeah, by the way, this is how things work, or this is how things have been shown to work throughout history.
Okay, here.
I think what's problematic, though, about saying that it's just a reminder about what's already happened is the fact that in order to be reminded, you have to experience something prior. And so there's a whole bunch of young people that, although they've heard and read things in history books, didn't actually experience stuff, and then the exposure that the lives of, not just this one black male, but millions of black males have experienced is something that didn't come into the living rooms, didn't come into people's Twitter feeds, didn't come into, the use of just media in general kind of put this in a place where we were all kind of watching and looking. I mean, I don't mean everyone. But I feel like it pains me to hear that in your group you feel nothing was gained.
Wait a minute.
We didn't say nothing.
Let her respond really quickly because we got to move on.
I definitely apologize for monopolizing. We never said nothing was gained. We said we didn't learn anything. I participated in Gen 6. I went to Louisiana. This is not the first time that media or social media has propelled something. What I'm saying is I did not learn anything new.
Let me get another group, one more group, and then we got two more comments before we move on. Which group? Over here? Come on.
Sure. So we talked a little bit about kind of like media attention, a feeling that like there was so much focus on the negative and not the positive things that were happening in the community and across the country, and that just seems like a problem with media in general. We talked a little bit about kind of like social media as well, definitely helping like push the issue out, but also a feeling that like not a lot of people were paying attention. If you took a step back and looked at like what other issues were trending at the same time, it seemed like a lot of people were just disengaged. Which kind of we felt like was a problem. We talked about just sort of reactions to the reactions. So there were some comments made about like a lack of understanding around why people in the community would be responding the way that they were. So there was all this negative reaction to the looting that was going on, and just kind of framing it in a negative light, and not necessarily taking a step back to try and understand why someone might do something like that, just as a way to react and kind of express frustration. We talked a little bit about that. We talked a little bit about the idea of police being sort of victims also within the system, and that in general that we think that this is an example of history repeating itself, and the reason that this keeps happening is because this topic is not being outwardly addressed in the way that it needs to actually make change.
Thank you. Two quick comments. This young man here and the young man in the back.
All right. First, it seems like a lot of the things that people are saying are mere like facts that came out of the case. By not learning anything, the first thing I wrote on my paper was that I didn't learn anything. And I wrote that because I'm saying, okay, this is things that I've experienced personally. Getting pulled over for no reason, getting put out of the car for no reason. My cousin got killed in a dirt bike by a police officer. Like, these are things that just happen in everyday life. So by it happening to somebody else and it just being displayed on the national level, doesn't mean that we're learning anything. It's just being attention brought to it. Okay. But also, the issue, or when I went back and I looked at it, I was saying, okay, well, people don't understand their rights and what should be happening in the role of the justice system. So by them going in and saying that the grand jury can say that he's being acquitted is not right, because all the grand jury is supposed to do is say whether there's evidence to go to trial. So only in the police system, or when you're dealing with police officers, can they say, okay, there's a murder weapon, there's evidence, there's witnesses, but we're not going to go to trial. But if those were two regular individuals on the street and you caught the person who shot him, then it would have immediately been a trial. And I feel like that was the lesson that was learned, where it's like, okay, we're going to go through a different type of system and try to sway what's going on just because it's a police officer involved.
Okay, last comment before we...
Yeah, but the young lady was saying in the front, and also Warren, really resonated with me because...
This young lady right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like we had a day and time where we had so many outlets of technology and social media. A lot of these things that are happening, of course we've been feeling it, and I feel like it's been under the radar. And for it to be happening with all these outlets of technology, and we see it on a national level, and still the system and justice continue to fail, it's like a slap in the face, and it really shows me that I should be afraid to be a young black male in America.
Any comment? Yes. And then here. He had his hand up first, and then here.
You can go. I'll speak later.
Go ahead, man. You gotta speak up a little bit though.
How do you put this?
Put it.
Big to what Derek was saying. I think
Is that Derek?
Derek,
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Based on his celebrity. Oh, Derek said. Go ahead.
I want to speak on it for the way things were carried out. It's in his last comment actually perpetuates where we fall short at. To say that he fears it. It shows that how things are structured, how society is structured, is still putting that mentee in that psyche for us to fear for our own lives, when we should also live a life where we want to love and want to share our own life. And for any person to grow up with the stigma behind them to say that they fear for absolutely doing nothing is something where we all fall short of the ultimate goal in life. And that is to all of us is to act. And more so that is to act and be committed. James Baldwin said that. He said it in 1966. He said, in the white man's world, a black man is a fixed star, an immovable pillar. And for us to, once a black man moves out of his place, the world is shaken to its foundation. But the only way to change that is to see if we will act, and that act is commitment. Once you act, that act in itself is danger. So we all fear for a certain danger to see if we're actually going to change that. And that's not into one person, but that's to all people. And that is not into one race, but that is to all race. When you turn on that television and what you observe, how would you act in that next sense of your own thought? How would you react to that next person? Will you be empathetic or sympathetic to them? And then that will change the resolution, and that will change your whole perspective on everything. But to actually hear a young man in 2014 say that he fears for his life when he wakes up, how would that change your mentality? Of how would you then educate another black young man? Or how would you go and give him that extra time and to do his homework?
Okay. Final comment here, and then we're going to process some of this stuff before we check out this video. Yes, ma'am.
I think I agree with what you said, and my comment is along the same lines as we can't confuse awareness with action. And we have to understand where that tipping point is, where people who are aware, when do they act, and then how do they act. So I think in talking with students about this, I think if we believe there's nothing we can do, then how do we talk to students about this? Like how do we go forward? But I think as a country, we really need to think about social action and awareness and how to make that real and really affect reform.
And so I want to make a couple comments as we transition into this video clip that I want you guys to take a look at, and I want you to kind of jot down some ideas, notes and reflections. In the training that I do, I use a lot of media because I think we live in a society where we are overwhelmed by media. And particularly as you work with young people, depending upon your use of media can be an extremely powerful tool. And so this particular video, there were a lot of raw video footage coming out of Ferguson. You know, the interesting thing is I probably have, 40 or 50 friends who literally moved to Ferguson to do this work. I mean, we're living in the basement of a church, in the basement of a daycare center, hooked up with some activists on the ground. And so I think that a lot of the activism and a lot of the training that's been going on with young people, nobody's talking about that. Right? The only reason why I didn't go to Ferguson because I had to be in another city, and the time that they wanted me to come out, I couldn't be two places at the same time. But don't underestimate the level of activism that's going on right after the incident, and that continues to go on. A lot of new emerging millennial groups started to begin to not just do the social media thing, because it's real easy to do the social media thing, because you just sit in front of your computer and you type something up and you send it out. But I'm talking about the leadership development. And so I agree with this young lady here, 3,000%. We can't lose hope, y'all. We can't. And while things may be difficult, things have been difficult before. I mean, if you understand your history, things have been definitely difficult before. I think what I hope that this group begins to think about is what are the kinds of things that you can do in your individual center. So some of you are in a center, like a school, and you're doing like after school work. Some of you are have a deeper level of engagement because you are a mentor or a tutor. So you're spending time with young people and, you know, in small groups and individually in terms of the things that you're doing. What are some of the kinds of things, and we're going to come back to this in a few minutes, what are some of the kinds of things that we can do? So I'm a husband, I'm a father, I have 3 children. There's no way I would tell my 15-year-old son that he's got to be afraid of the police and he's going to die. There's no way. Because what that does is, and part of what happens a lot of times is that's what we're telling these young men. I was told the same thing when I went to Walbrook Senior High School. You're going to be just like them other dudes in the neighborhood. You're going to go to prison. Why would you tell a young black male you're going to prison? And so some of it is we really got to, let me jump to this really, really quickly because I know we don't have a whole lot of time. Some of it is we got to kind of change the frame in which we're using to help these young men understand the realities of society. The vast majority of young black males are not connected to the streets. They're not selling drugs. They're doing well academically and socially, but they still have in the back of their mind this notion it could happen. And so a couple of things really quickly that I want you to think about as we move into this video. What is justice? I mean, we throw around that term. Any lawyers in the room? I know it's got to be, whenever you have a gathering, there's got to be at least 2 or 3 lawyers. Okay. So we got some lawyers in the room. I want y'all to begin to think about what is justice? What does justice really mean? And then the second thing, as I said a few minutes ago, is interesting because in the state of Illinois, you can't have any conversations with students about Ferguson, about Eric Garner, about Trayvon Martin. There's states that are banning adults from having this conversation from a school perspective. Now, some of it is leadership in some of these school districts feel that the adults are not ready to have this conversation. I would submit, if we can't have a conversation and provide young people with a balance, the dude that's on the corner, what are you going to say to the young people? Fuck the police. Some of y'all remember that song? I know y'all too young to probably. NWA. That was one of my favorites. That was when I was a different person. That was a long, long time ago. But that's what the dude on the corner is going to say. That's what the dude, you know, remember, we just had a police officer shot here in front of Mondawmin. Routine traffic stop. You've had 4 New York City police officers shot in, what, 2 weeks? So the cats on the corner not afraid to tell these young boys, shoot them. We got to be the interveners. Because here's the sad reality. A lot of these kids come to you in your program, and they seem really nice and really cool. Many of us have no idea what their home environment is like. And those other forces positive and negative that they deal with on a regular basis. And so some of what I think that we got to do from a program standpoint is we got to do more with our young men. All right, we got to do more stuff around leadership development, bringing people in to talk to these young men, particularly young men and older men who have had challenges in the community, but were fortunate enough to start a company, or were fortunate enough to go to college, or were fortunate enough to go into the military. Military recruiters would love to just come in and, you know, talk to young people. I mean, again, I think that there's so many opportunities to get men engaged in programming. The challenge is very difficult for a lot of African American men to accept the idea of being a one-on-one mentor. We know that for a fact. We know that across the country. But that doesn't mean young men and older men won't come into your program right here and just chop it up with the young men for 20 minutes, or a young lady. Because I'm equally concerned about our girls. Now, when you look at the rates of homicides and non-fatal injuries, you know, you don't see a huge increase in violence among girls as it relates to arrests. In schools, you see a lot of suspensions and expulsions. And on the adult side, like the number of women of color going to prison has increased like 800% or something like that. I mean, I do a program really quickly. I do a program every year at Jessup Correctional Facility. And I've worked with mothers and grandmothers locked up on the same unit. You know, mom introduced grandma to crack cocaine. And so these are some of the layers that we got to begin to think about. And we do need to expand and increase our services for girls. Any questions really quickly before we go to the video? And if anybody has program-specific questions, I mean, that's my background. I've designed youth programs, not just for young black males, but all kinds of children all over the world. So my background is program delivery. So if you're trying to figure out how you can have this conversation with some scholars in your program, let's enter that into the space. So I have some ideas, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people in the room that have some ideas. Can y'all turn the light off, please?
We don't want to burn down our own neighborhoods. We don't want to be in a state of war with the police.
All of these preparations are being made with the expectation that a system that is supposed to work for everyone is going to fail once again for Black people of America.
It's just depressing to me because I know we're going to lose business. I'm probably going to lose my job. It's not our fault, and that we're paying for choices and mistakes that were made by the Ferguson Police Department. I mean, it's just dark, it's gloomy. It just doesn't feel like the happy, bright atmosphere that it normally is. We have 2 peek holes in, that we can look out the front doors, and that's it.
A human being killed another young human being, shot him multiple times with a high-powered pistol, and left him in the street.
In the last few months, after Mike Brown was killed, I can name at least 3 people that were murdered by police that were unarmed.
Kim King, Kajeen Powell, Mike Brown, Von Derek Myers. There's 4 people.
My name is James Knowles. I'm the mayor of the city of Ferguson. I've been mayor for 4 years.
The mayor of Ferguson is a bitch. He can't help us. He's not on our side. He's not for the people at all.
His unfortunate shooting death has brought a lot of things to light in the community.
Heard about a statement saying that, you know, Ferguson is over this race problem or the anger. I can't understand it. It's like he lives in another world.
For me personally, you know, this is required a great deal of patience.
Like, you really care? He don't care about us, bro. He's not for the people at all. He for himself.
It does, you know, it does create a great deal of stress on the family, and we haven't had that really affect us too much.
I feel like there's nothing that can atone for the systemic oppression and the loss of life that we suffer every 28 hours where a black person is gunned down by vigilante or police violence. Until we address the issues that allow that statistic to live and breathe as we go on, there's nothing that they can say or that they can do that should be able to placate someone with the memory of Mike Brown lying for 4.5 hours out in the street.
No peace! No racist! Police! No racist! Police! Get back! Get back! We want freedom! Freedom! Only racist! We don't need that!
Every 2 weeks for the last 6 years, a black person has been killed by a police officer. Police officers killed 400 people, local police officers killed 400 people last year. That is a problem.
Yep. We love you, Drupal Dog. You my son, but you was still like a brother to me still. More than the son. But it's gonna be all right, little bro. I love you to death. And I can't wait to meet you in the afterlife, baby. If there's such thing as afterlife, I can't wait to meet you there.
Oh, yeah, we understand.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, but we love you, Drew. We'll always love you, homeboy.
We love you, Drew.
True blood.
You killing young black youth my age in the streets. We 90s babies, 80s babies. I don't give a fuck how many guns you got, none of that. We react off our feelings.
I wish that they would have did the right thing. I wish that, you know, this was a golden opportunity for our politicians to be on the right side of history. But they chose not to. So for me, man, it's like, I've always felt, you know, if it's fuck us, then it's fuck you towards the system.
When they actually offer something that stares in the face of anti-black sentiments that exist in this country, when we actually start to talk to each other and hear each other, and we don't throw the race card term around, we don't throw the racism word around, this innocuous word that no one knows what it means, when we actually sit down and we go, no, these systems that we have in place are anti-black. These policies that we have in place are anti-black. This shoot first, ask questions later is anti-black. The way that we treat our black slain men and women in the media after they've been gunned down and can no longer speak for themselves is anti-black. When they throw that political bone and we can actually address it and start to make change, then we'll be satisfied.
I'm not here to try to validate the justice system because there's a lot of changes that need to occur. But the indictment of Darren Wilson is the first step of many that need to take place. But we got to get him indicted first.
Nobody's asking for Darren Wilson to be killed. Nobody's asking for him to be shot in the street. Nobody's asking for him to be strung up like we have been for every decade of every century that we've been here. We're asking for him to be charged for the crime that he committed in front of witnesses. There's a system that's in place. You created the system. You enforce the system every day. But we're saying, oh, that guy should be included in the system. That's all.
If there's no indictment, people, quite frankly, I think would just lose hope in America.
No indictment is a declaration of war from the state, from the police, from the system itself, issued to black and brown, oppressed people, poor people of all creeds. That's what I believe.
This is a nationwide problem. This is an American problem. This is a systemic oppression problem.
We're going to keep making noise until we talk about some real systemic change for people.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our change. We have nothing to lose but our change. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win.
The interesting thing about Ferguson, right, is that there's actually nothing unique about the situation, right? Like, cop kills black person every 28 days all year. So, you know, why Ferguson? Why not Beaver Creek? Why not Oakland? Why not somewhere else? Why not New York? Why not Staten Island? Ferguson decided they had enough.
It's also not just Ferguson. Ferguson is just the epicenter. And Mike Brown is just a catalyst for a much bigger conversation. And the only reason people came out is because they're tired of it. So that means it must have been happening all over for a very long time.
Ferguson sent a message to oppressed people around the world to remind them that black people in America have not forgot the root of our struggle. It reminded them that we are in the same class as them, that we have the same exact story that they have.
I don't want to see a better tomorrow. I want to see a better forever. I want to see my motherfucking kids, they kids, they kids, they kids. I want to see what my ancestors think they did by giving me the right to vote. I want to see a better forever. But tomorrow will not help me. Waking up tomorrow and being like, yes, we finally free, and then waking up fucking Tuesday and seeing my brother dead in the street, that's not gonna help me. I want to see a better forever.
What you saw out there is just people hurt and really responding to a situation from a very humanistic level, throwing out all the textbook rules. You know, we're regular people. You don't run up on the police. You don't engage with a militarized force as a regular American citizen. Like, we're people who have regular lives. We shop at Foot Locker. We go to Walmart. We eat McDonald's. We're regular human beings. We're regular American citizens. This isn't some magical coup of young people who sat in the house and said, man, one day we're gonna slide on the police. Nah. But we saw somebody dead in the middle of the street, disrespected, and we knew we had to do something about it.
Okay, you can hit the lights. I knew we weren't going to have a bunch of time, but we got at least one more activity I want to try to squeeze in. Jump back into your smaller groups and just reflect. What did you think? Did you think the people that were interviewed were off base? Were they on point? And then we're going to process a couple more questions as it relates to things that you guys can actually do leaving here. Because I think, as somebody over here said, a lot of times they are very fruitless conversations. But a lot of times the conversations are fruitless because people in rooms like this, a lot of times, may not necessarily want to go to the next level. And the next level for you might be, you know, figuring out a way to create a leadership project and embed that in the work that you're already doing at your school or at your center. Here's one thing that I do know. One of the challenges that we find, particularly in the African-American communities, not just solely in the African-American community, is we have a crisis as it relates to father engagement. Now, are there a whole bunch of fathers that we never highlight? I highlight responsible father 365 days a year. Part of the challenge that we're faced with, and that you're faced with, is we got a lot of young boys and girls growing up in communities and don't have access to a sober, responsible, and we can add to that list of men, right? Whether it's the biological father, you know, the stepfather, the uncle. And so there is an entire body of work that I'm involved in just focused on getting fathers to return home. I mean, a very specific focus, whether these men are locked up and mom is willing to, you know, once they get released, as long as they're not like an axe murder or something crazy like that, as long as mom is agreeable to help us try to mediate the situation, we're going to try to work at it. So just take about 5 minutes real quick, share your reflections, you can jot them down. We're going to collect your cards, all right? So don't throw your cards away. If you put your name or your alias on there, just scratch it out. Take 5 quick minutes, 5 quick minutes.
Yeah. I've been to the other end.
Yeah, I think it just adds to the fact that
because it didn't really get, I felt like it didn't get the bear. It was,
Because the problem is not just, although it may just be in the African American community, it don't have to be solved with only African Americans are fighting.
Are out there helping me or helping us to better ourselves. And so that they can. They use what they need in this situation. Someone brings it up to them. Be honest with them.
1 minute, 1 minute.
Try to dispel the untruths that they may have so that they understand what actually took place, why that process was the way it was versus what they thought it should have been. It's them. That's right. What that.
If you can hear my voice clap once, that was weak. That was horrible. Wow. If you can hear my voice clap once, hear my voice clap twice. Aaron, do you know how many copies of these you made of the article? Do you remember how many you made? Yeah, you're going to need to make, I guess, how many people in here? Do you know offhand? Okay. Whenever folks come together, we never have enough time. So here's one of the things that I would hope you do. Each of you are in a group. I would love for the members of the group to exchange emails, phone numbers, whatever the best way for you to communicate and continue not only to talk about Ferguson and Eric Garner, but talk about some of the larger issues and begin to share with your colleagues what you are actually doing. Part of the challenge is we're looking for a silver bullet. As I told this young lady here, and I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your name? Brooke said that she feels, and let me know if I'm accurate. She says sometimes she tutors 3 boys. Sometimes she says she feels inadequate and not necessarily equipped to work with these boys. And the thing that I said to her, and I would say to each of you in here, is just your presence means something. Do not underestimate your presence in the life of a child, particularly a child who's coming from some real difficult circumstances, difficult neighborhood, some of the schools that these children go to. That's a whole nother workshop, right? Just your presence. As I was sharing with this young lady, people would tell me stuff when I was at Tawanda Rec Center, when I was 12, 13 years old. I'd be looking at these people like, lady, you out of your goddamn mind. You clearly don't know what you're talking about, right? But it wasn't until I got older, because again, just because you say something today doesn't mean it's going to resonate today. The work that you guys are doing, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Are there going to be some good days? Yeah. Are there going to be some bad days? Oh, yeah. I've buried about 40 kids in Baltimore, 40 kids that I've had a relationship with. So there are going to be some bad days. Sad, I'm being honest, sad day, there are going to be some funerals. There are going to be some kids in houses where the house burned down. How many of y'all remember the Dawson family? I was torn up by the Dawson family. Right, I actually published a children's book. Everybody familiar with the Dawson family? Who's not familiar? Raise your hand so I can be clear. Dawson family was a family of 5 in East Baltimore. They were going to testify against a drug dealer. He kicked the back door in, doused the staircase with gasoline, killed mom and dad and the 3 children. Again, this is the mindset, y'all. I mean, it's a sad reality, but understand just your presence. Every day you come to mentor those 3 kids, you excited. You on fire. I don't care if your boyfriend threw you out the house last night, get over it. Because it doesn't have nothing. Because some of us, it's hard for us to compartmentalize personal and business. When you come in there and you tutoring them 4 boys, you got to give them a Denzel Washington performance, even if you need to go in the bathroom and cry afterwards. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. There are no silver bullets. All right? But as it relates to, any comments about the video real quick? I'm just interested. And we're going to wrap up in about 10 minutes. Questions or comments, reflections? Yes, sir.
Well, we immediately centered around the splicing of the marriage, talking with that kid. And it was really evocative, definitely.
He wasn't talking to the kid.
They weren't talking, but that's
right,
exactly
right,
the thing
okay.
is that it was also really exploitative in the sense of talking past each other, right? So, and I think it was designed to make the mayor look a certain way, right? By like the kid saying like, "Oh, he just cares about himself," and then the mayor says something about himself.
Right. That's film. I would love to hear more from the mayor.
Exactly.
Just to have a more balanced.
Yeah, and to hear kind of that as a conversation rather than a talking past each other, which I think is so leads to those conversations.
Anybody else? Yes.
Just saying in our group, I was really struck by the last speaker who was talking about being this big, advocate and saying, I didn't really expect that. I shop at Foot Locker. I don't see myself as this big advocate. And then I thought, did the police officer shop at Foot Locker? Did the young man shop at Foot Locker? Do any of us here shop at Foot Locker? I mean, we don't even. You don't. Okay. I actually don't either. But we don't even know that about each other. And the very fact of breaking down the walls and like learning just the most basic things and just listening to people raising their hands and even reflecting on some personal things. I know people in this room, and I actually didn't know some of the things that they said. And sort of shame on me, right? I mean, I work with these people and see these people, and we don't sit down and break down the barriers between us. And so how can we look at all of society if we don't start at home?
Right. I don't care who you are. You working with children, you will feel inadequate. I mean, I've had this conversation with Sean Dove and Jeff Canada, even some guys, men and women, Marion Wright Edelman. I mean, people who are at the top of their game. I mean, because you're going to get some wins, but you're going to get some losses. And so just a couple of things as we begin to wind down. As you leave here, and I really hope you will stay in contact with somebody who you didn't necessarily know. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the world revolves based on relationships. And the relationships that we have are so important. It allows us to kind of navigate. And there may be somebody that's sitting with the 4 of y'all. And let's use this young lady right here in the purple. What's that, a UNLV jersey? What's that say? Navy. Oh, okay. Told you I was sick. My eyes is failing too. You may have something that you're doing that the other 4 of them don't even know about. But they're not going to know about it unless we are strategic in terms of open the door and having these courageous conversations. Really important. Some of the things that I think are really important to do with young people is give them some of these questions that we are sort of grappling with. What is justice? Ask your scholars, what is justice? Have them define what justice is, right? What is racism? Because if I asked 3 people what racism was, and I asked them individually, and they didn't hear the other responses, there'd be some overlap, but many of us would have some different definitions around racism. So some of it is, here we go, start with critical vocabulary. Who went to school at a time when they gave out vocabulary? You had vocabulary tests. They don't redo that no more. Start with a critical, what does it mean to be constitutional? Even something as simple as a quick 5-minute icebreaker, and you have young people kind of define some terms, then you go to Webster or whatever the other dictionaries is, and kind of figure out which scholar came up with the most accurate definition. You give them a Skittle or something. I mean, I don't know, right? And so being creative, for those that email me, I'm going to send you, if you put on the sheet you want the resources, I'm going to send you videos, journal articles. I also think that there's some really interesting things that you can do with young people in terms of looking at things like the movie Selma just came out, and looking at comparing what happened, during the civil rights movement, things like the sit-ins, and the fact that most adults don't realize that you couldn't just go to the Woolworths. You had to be, there was a training that you, nonviolent training that you had to go through. How many of our children know that? So there's a wealth of, I think, information and resources that you guys can connect with. And once again, I'll send you a list. One other thing really quickly, then I'm going to give out this article. This is your homework. Who doesn't like doing homework? 2 people, 3 people. Would you do it for me? Okay. Also understand when we think about solutions, y'all, we got to think about community-based solutions, like what you guys do. You guys provide a community-based intervention or solution. But then we also got to look at policy. And so rest assured that while a lot of you are trying to figure out how to be more creative with your scholars, how to deliver a more impactful lesson, there are hundreds of people, thousands of people, even before these incidents happen, groups like Policy Link, groups like CLASP, the CLASP. There are hundreds of groups, not just in Washington, Ella Baker Center for Nonviolence in Oakland, Fannie Lou Hamer Center for Nonviolence, Muhammad Ali Center for Nonviolence. looking at both policy and programming. So I think that there's a wealth of information. Here's your homework assignment. Can somebody pass these out? Thank you. I wrote an article for the Open Society Foundation blog on Will America Ever Change? And one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of mix it up in terms of do the video piece, do some discussion, then I'm going to leave you with something to take with you, is because we got to figure out as adults. The problem is us, y'all. The problem is us. We the attorneys, we the judges, we the people that make these policy decisions. We don't have a kid problem in America, we got an adult problem. Some of y'all probably don't even agree because you may be part of the problem. That's another workshop. We ain't going there today. But I want you to take home the article. I want you to read it. I'm going to give you my email address, and I want you to email me your reflections. This would also be there are a bunch of articles, some more over here. There are a bunch of articles that have been written that are good conversation starters. Like I have friends who are hosting events at their house and inviting, diverse groups of people to come out and do tea and cookies and just figure out ways that we can strengthen this army of co-laborers. And so you might use this article, you might use one of the other articles or videos, but don't leave here, y'all, and not do anything. I don't really like Al Sharpton. I'm on camera. Oh, my God. I'm not particularly fond of Al. But one of the things that, I don't know I'm going to get in trouble for this, one of the things that I do like about him, despite all of the other stuff, that be going on, he real on point with what's happening in this country. And it's going to take more of us. We keep waiting for the government. It's going to take more of us. This young lady right here, the courage that she got working with them three, Brooke, thank you. She's still a young lady. The courage that Brooke has to work with those boys. Even though, Brooke, have you thought about have you thought about quitting? Different conversation I got to have later on. Have you thought about quitting? Anybody ever thought about quitting? Be honest. Some of y'all lying. At least half of y'all have thought about turning in your paperwork. Right? But we don't want you to turn in your paperwork because, we trying to build a better society. So you got to fill out your evaluations. You got to do this. Email address. My personal email address is dmiller3941 @gmail.com. dmiller3941 @gmail.com. Even if you thought it was horrible, say it was horrible, period. All right. dmiller3941 @gmail. How many of you are willing to stay in contact with the person who was in your group? Okay. Who just doesn't care about other people? You just out there, okay, all right. Well, only 2 people raised their hand. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, I guess I'm done. I wish we had more time. Oh, can I say something? Can I say something really quickly? Really quickly. Here's the irony of how I found out about Mike Brown being killed. I was coming out of one of the slave castles in Ghana, West Africa. I just took a group of people through a tour, and I turned my phone off because I went in, and my phone just started, ringing, text messages, all this stuff, right? And I found out about what had happened. And then 2 days later, somebody in my office, I don't know how many of you guys have seen this. This went viral, and we've been, having groups use this all over the country because at least, and it's controversial because I've had police departments who have some concerns about it, but when I'm working with boys, I'm trying to teach them the rules of survival when they get home because I learned it from my father learned it from his father, even though they grew up in a different time period historically. And so that was the irony of me finding out about Mike Brown. I'm in a slave castle in West Africa. Come out, my phone is, jumping off the hook. And so, you gonna do the raffle? Okay. Can you ask me a question? Yeah.
So speaking on that, I have two African American boys, one 10, one 6.
Yeah.
And I find myself not knowing sometimes what to say to them or what to tell them when they're walking out the door or
Right.
when they're going to the store. My son the other day went into a store and he likes to put his hoodie on all the time, and I found myself yelling out the window, almost like an instinct, and it was awkward and weird when you go and don't put the hood on. When you walk in, and it was awkward, it was uncomfortable. He didn't understand it, and I couldn't explain it.
Plus, it was cold outside.
So here's the conversation that I have with parents. You do your child a disservice by not teaching him what to do when he encounters a police officer. Because here's what happens. When a police officer rolls up on a young person, they automatically are afraid. Even before these things happen, the most recent cases, they already afraid because we culturally conditioned boys. And I don't care if you living in middle America or even if your parents have money, right? I mean, you look at what Mayor de Blasio said to his biracial son, and I thought they were going to string him alive. But he has a black son, biracial son, who has an afro. And he said that he talks to his son about what to do, and they threw him under the bus. Our children are afraid when they get stopped. They don't know what to do. And so the way you start the conversation off really quickly is you let your son know that the vast majority of police officers, men and women, black or white, Native American, Asian, you name it, are good people. Good, law-abiding, honest people who want to get home to their families, right? But at some point, you may or may not run into some who may not necessarily like you for a number of reasons. You got your pants hanging down, you got a hood on, you got the earphones on. They got to learn this lesson. Selwyn can tell you the vast majority of young people who receive their first juvenile arrest is not because they are doing anything. It's because they have a negative encounter with the police. You go down to baby booking. What's the real name for the juvenile detention center? Okay. We call it baby booking. You'll be blown away by the number of 6- and 7-year-olds that are locked up there, waiting for a parent to come pick them up. Because they can lock you up, they can detain you at 6. Now, they can't necessarily interview you or talk to you, but they can detain you, they can call your parents. And so I'm sure you're a 10-year-old and just wandering around Baltimore aimlessly without a plan. But even if he's going to the mall, he's got to know when they stop him, he got to be real clear. Keep them hands out so you can see him. It's hard. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, I got a 15-year-old son. For me to have to teach my son the same thing I learned in 1983, but we out of time. But it's going to be all right. All right.
So,
you can pass these out. People want to get in touch with you.
okay. So this has been really fabulous, and I think the one thing I want to highlight is that, you know, David has left us with sort of a gift, and that is that we can do something, and doing something starts with us. It starts with showing up, which is what you've done, showing up outside of here with kids. It starts with learning, which is what you've done tonight by opening your minds and your hearts, by reading his article, by following up and getting the references that he's given us, and by building relationships. And that's what you've done tonight. And as you've said, I hope that you continue to reach out. And my ask for you all tonight, and hopefully you've been inspired to action, is to show up for something extremely important. And that is, everybody take out a pen, or your iPad, or your smartphone, and write down this date. And it's March 25th, which I believe is a Wednesday, from 6 to 7 o'clock, 1 hour of your life, to come to Higher Achievements Love Out Loud. And Love Out Loud is an annual event that we do with our young people. Our scholars who are in middle school write poems on love. Imagine being in middle school, pouring your heart out, making yourself vulnerable, tweaking, editing, writing a poem about love, and then practicing it, and then being willing to stand up in front of an audience and share that poem. Well, this year, our event's happening at the Walters Art Gallery. There'll be 15 finalists. You'll hear poems that'll rip your heart out. You'll hear whimsical poems. You're going to hear the variety. But the most important thing is when they stand up on that stage, they deserve to look out on a packed audience. That is what we owe our children. That is what David was talking about. Showing up matters. And I've been to many of these events where we try to get people out and they don't come out. And we all say we have good intentions to support our children, but when it really push comes to shove, you know, something comes up, friends invite you out, you got another appointment, whatever it is, but I am asking you, I am imploring you to put this date on your calendar and make sure that you show up as a symbol of your belief in young people, your action that you want to take to support them. So we just have a 2-minute clip of one of our scholars that performed at Love Out Loud.
Love is the manipulator that can have you believe it's different things. It could be the key to falling, the key to hurting, the key to being happy, the key to living the way that you want to live. Love is a breath of fresh air. Wait, it's a mind of confusion. Wait, it's a dungeon of hurt. My left hand always told me, the love is going to come. I don't know if the fresh air love will, or the hurt love will. But I know I've been through both. The word love, it sounds like a soft, healing, hugging, kissing, trusting word. But now I know. Never judge the word by its color. I would say thank you, love. But through these moments of life, I could see you will never be done with me.
Okay. Please make sure to fill out your evaluation. Someone's got one thing to say.
I just wanted to stand in honor of you, David. Not that you had the flu, the boogie woogie flu or anything like that, but I've been listening to David for a number of years. We are friends. I love him as a brother. But many times he wanted to leave Baltimore. And he'd come to me and say certain things about why he felt that way about the situation. But because of his passion and his love, that was a nice note to end on, he stayed with this wonderful city. But what touched me so much tonight, very brief, my mentee, who I've known since he's 12, who's now, I believe, 37 or 36, lives in the area, super talented, been through the hell that some of my brothers spoke of earlier. He came here because I told him David Miller was here. And I asked him to come, and you know him, Darren. I asked him to come because I knew David would inspire him to continue working and giving back. So all these teachers and wonderful mentors in the room, I hope you heard what David said about being inspired and not giving up, because we are the answer, we are the solution. I was really inspired when I saw some people, I believe in Korea, holding their hands up and speaking about the universal problem that was mentioned. And I think the ultimate answer is love and that commitment that allows us to, get out of our comfort zone and give back. And I think, as David said in his closing, he said, we'll be all right. And I thank the world and the Creator for people like you, Aaron, who are not afraid. Even though earlier you said you were afraid.
Thank you all.